So we're live now. Hey everyone. Hope you're having a good Thursday. I can't believe Saturday is October.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it, doesn't it? It's felt like I've been cold. I hate to be whiny because I'm very privileged. I live in a very warm house. I don't, but I can't get warm the last few
No.
days.
I've already been running my foot heater.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We're not used to it. I guess we have to adapt to it.
And I'm such a baby about it.
Me too. I admittedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I blame it on being born and growing up in Arizona, Phoenix area until I reached right before high school. And I swear that has set my temperature expectation for the rest of my life. But
yeah,
much rather be hot than cold.
Oh, me too. I've only been in 4 seasons my entire life. And I keep thinking, what are you waiting for? Go south.
Not to Florida, though.
That looks like a mess. Oh my goodness. I feel so bad.
It is a mess. It's really awful. Yeah.
Yikes.
Crazy. But lots of other places. I do the same thing every winter. I'm like, okay, why am I not living where it's warmer? And
yeah. Because Columbus
I feel very lucky that could be an option, and yet I won't leave my family. So my mom and my kids and my grandkids. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Ann Miller says there's
oh my gosh, there's scientific evidence that your temperature is set from when you are born.
I'm the exception to that because I have a total
thank you.
desire to not be cold, and I was born in Nebraska.
Where it's very cold. Well, and what time of year were you born? Because I've heard that has an effect too. Like what?
That might be
month? Yeah.
August.
Me too. End of August. Yeah, like the hottest part of of the year in Central Arizona. So that's fascinating, Anne. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, we really are live now, and it is 11:30. So we'll get started. I'm super excited again about this week. Every week. I'm excited. So thank you everyone for tuning in and being with us. I welcome you, and we hope that you find the session today helpful. I'm so excited to have Shiloh Todorov here today to talk about small shop nonprofits. There are so many small nonprofits, so hopefully you find this useful. A little bit about Shiloh. She joined Move to Prosper as a volunteer in September 2020 and joined the staff in June 2021. She has over a decade of nonprofit experience, including her previous roles raising money for the Matriots PAC and as executive director of the German Village Society and marketing PR director for the Wellington School. Prior to her career in nonprofit and development, Shiloh was a television journalist, which I think is fascinating, most recently serving as a managing editor for KETV.com. Shiloh was born and raised in rural Nebraska and holds a master's degree in broadcast and public policy from American University in Washington, D.C., where she got to also cover the White House. That I find even more fascinating. So welcome, Shiloh.
Yeah,
and
the Clinton and Bush years. That was my White House stint.
Wow.
Oh my God. 18 months at the end of Bill Clinton and 18 months at the beginning of W.
Oh, wow. That had to be some really wild times.
Wild.
Wow.
And the contrast between the two administrations.
My gosh, yes. Yes. And just the news stories that were happening then.
Yeah. The first day of my internship that led to me getting the actual job covering the White House was the first day of the Clinton impeachment trial.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Yeah.
That was high drama, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. Thank you for having me, Libby.
Oh yeah, I'm thrilled. So, and I'm Libby D, nonprofit champion, founder of Libby D and Associates, and through visioning, theory of change work, leadership coaching, fundraising support, and organizational and board development, our nonprofit leader clients successfully raise more money and have more impact. But not all nonprofits can afford to hire a consultant. So I created the Nonprofit Coffee Talk as a way to provide some really great content and information to as many nonprofit people as I can. So hope you find it useful. Please feel free to suggest other topics or other guests you'd like to see, or if you'd like to be a guest, let me know that. Would love to have a discussion about that. So, okay, so let's jump right in, Shiloh.
Right on.
Tell us a little bit about some of the places you've had a chance to be part of small shop fundraising.
Well, it's funny, and you just kind of listed where I've been in Central Ohio, and isn't it interesting that the Wellington School is the largest nonprofit that I've been a part of? But if you X out the teachers, which are like 110 of the 130 people that live or work there, right? You still have a pretty small little nonprofit that I had the pleasure of learning so much about how nonprofits work, because I was coming from media, right? And I had this opportunity to work in communication at Wellington. And so not only were they like kind of still young enough, but their whole brand is doing things differently and iterating. And so that was like really the culture there. And so I had the opportunity to start understanding, okay, how do boards interact here? In communication, I essentially had clients that were the admissions office, the fundraising office, right? The magazine, which essentially served the academic branches. Mm-hmm. And then while I was doing that job, it was almost to my third year, third anniversary of doing that job. And one of the women that I worked with, she was the alumni director at Wellington, lived in German Village. And she called me and said, we're looking for an executive director down here, and I feel like you have the right personality to do it. I didn't really know what that meant until after having worked at German Village Society for 7 years. But I did have the personality to do it.
And what is that?
Well, I think it's a neighborhood, right? And it's a neighborhood full of passionate, very involved, focused type A people. So you have to treat it as a neighborhood because it's a community, it's the community center, right? You've got to be like friendly and inviting. You've got to be able to hear a lot of people's opinions, but they want to get stuff done, right? And so it was like this kind of perfect storm of like, I'm somebody who can't procrastinate because I just need to not have that list forming in the back of my mind all the time, right? And tend to be, as many people in nonprofit are, a people pleaser, right? So my type A-ness and my friendliness were a good match for that small shop. And I'm very pleased to say, when I got there, I was full-time and I had a part-time kind of everything under the sun, operations, whatever, right? And by the time I left, we were 4 full-time people. So I exploded that small nonprofit.
You did. You quadrupled it or something, or tripled or doubled at least.
Yeah, great. But I had a really cool board there, and they took my hand and just absolutely would not let me fail and showed me so many things about governance and how to put volunteers to work, because that's like a key in small nonprofit especially, right? How can I buy more bandwidth with $0? And boy, that was a really great learning experience. And again, like a really committed community that all did turn out to roll up their sleeves. So that was really key. And then the last 2 jobs that I've had, the Matriots and Move to Prosper, I have discovered how I really like to be part of something that's just getting started. To have the combination of it being small and new has just been kind of a really fun realm to be a part of. Some of it's incredibly exhilarating, some of it's super frustrating, but no matter how each day kind of proceeds, you're going to see your fingerprints on that organization like not later than the next week, right? It might be the next day. Yeah. So I think I've come to appreciate that about small nonprofits in general, regardless of their age, right? You can watch your work move the needle every day.
That's a great point. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say it like that. And I love that so much. It's so true.
Yeah.
Your hand is in everything.
Everything. Yeah, there's
small shop like that.
There's not enough headspace for all the hats you're going to end up wearing.
That's right. Right. For sure. So it sounds like you really are attracted to like small and startup. And do you feel like, you always hear that it's nimble and it's innovative and it's high energy and it's like, so what stands out for you as far as definitely your personality type lends itself to that too, right? But what else do you think is like the draw for you to those types of organizations?
It's definitely, some of it is definitely what Anne is putting in the chat, only instead of it being about cold weather, it is where I'm from, right? I mean, I was from such rural Nebraska that there were 10 people in my high school graduating class.
Wow.
So I'm not used to, having to compete for attention, I guess, right? Or to like not have somebody in a decision-making role know my name and what my talent set is and how to call on me. That is just like, that's who and how and where I was raised. And I went to a small college too. So I think I just naturally function better in those places. But I'm also allergic to like bureaucracy and red tape and process, right? So to your point, and I think you said innovative and fast moving in there, right? Those are definitely things that are a better match for my work style. And I think too, and this has a lot to do with the people that I've had the opportunity to work with, but I think it's also a factor in most small shops. There's a little bit more opportunity to fail sometimes. Hey, let's try that. Let's measure it, right? Like, let's pay attention to whether or not that actually ended up working for us, because there's so few paid hours in a week across the entire organization. You kind of want to know, should we spend more time on this or should we spend less time on this?
Yes.
Right? But I do think there is a lot of opportunity to try some things and innovate and I've found them to be safer spaces to fail too. Oh, all right, didn't work. Let's try something else.
That's a positive thing too, if you're that kind of personality, right? Like I could see some people just really not thriving in that environment, but those are two different types of work environments, right? That small and nimble and innovative and let's fail forward to success versus a giant organization that has all its policies and processes and systems in place and you just kind of come in and do the status quo. I don't mean that to sound negative. It's not negative. It's just
different. Yeah, just different.
Yeah. So, Were you going to say
I was thinking about a conversation I was having with a colleague just last night, also a small shopper. And we were kind of talking about this personality thing, right? It's her time of year to be doing her staff's reviews and that sort of thing. And we were talking about the places where she was looking to her colleagues to be able to really run with some ideas or kind of do things in a super independent way. And so these were some of the things she was like jotting on the back of the napkin, right? Okay, I want to kind of talk about these things. And then we kind of concluded together there was a different sort of expectation in their previous work lives, a couple of her very small staff, right? Like coming from jobs that really didn't require a ton of innovation. In fact, probably required not a lot of independence, right? Where this is how we do it every year. This is how your piece of that puzzle is supposed to work, right? And then we make it happen, and then we start over again in the next year, right? So just thinking about, even as you're hiring, because I said, I think the difference is like, what's your experience, but also mindset. Are you okay, that's where you came from, but are you willing to say, oh, you're giving me the reins? Okay, I have some ideas.
Yeah. And if you're the type of person that's like that, right? Like you, that like likes to try new things and, and you go into a culture where the leader isn't, into that or is threatened by all this, suggestions of changing because they've got a weak ego and they take that personally, right? Like I've built this and now you're trying to say it needs improved upon, right? You have to be careful. It's a
Yes,
delicate walk when you have
that's
that
right.
experience. So
That's
yeah.
right.
Let's talk about some of the challenges of being a one person fundraising department, because that is probably the norm in nonprofits, unless they're really big.
Yeah.
Um, talk about that, your experience, and like any sort of um, things to avoid or cautions. So,
Well, I think that you. So, what came to my head as you were answering this question is like my kind of gold standard of the opposite of my work style and relationship. I always think of OSU, right? Just because they have like literally thousands of people who are fundraisers, and they're divided up by college and department, right? And each of them in many cases has like I am just the grant writer, right? I do not talk to donors, or I only talk to donors when it is annual gift time. I only talk to donors at the major gift, right? And like the complexity that I've never experienced, to the extent that sometimes I'll be on LinkedIn and I'll see a job posting and I'll think, I see that's a development job. I don't even know what that means.
Well, and sometimes, having been a one person fundraising staff, right? Sometimes I look at that with so much jealousy. Like, you mean you only do annual fund?
100%.
What?
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
So I do think that is a key downside of being a one-person shop, right? You're probably going to come into a job like this with a set of talents or experiences that lend themselves to one of those things. But guess what? You get to do all of those things, right? I was saying to you before we went live, I cannot stand events. Like, there is something about having to plan an event that just does not align with my personality. Part of it is the detail work. The part of it is that if you don't do it really, really well, you end up losing money. And then what was the point, right? So I just have a lot of tension as it relates to events. But guess what? In a one-person shop, I'm always going to have some events to have to like create out of whole cloth, and that's where I really hope those volunteers are ready to help out, right?
Yeah. If there's never been a time to recruit volunteers, it's that, right?
Yes, yes, precisely.
Events.
Although it does tend to be, in my experience, a place that people enjoy putting their time and energy. So that's great. That's a good match for me. I mean, I don't think there's any nonprofit that's probably come onto Coffee Talk and said, I have too much money and too many staff, right?
I haven't heard that my whole life.
Yeah. You be sure and let me know.
Right.
But I think, that's a problem too. You are not only, when you're hired, I think whether or not it's articulated or not, there's a hope that not only are you all the functions of fundraising, but there's likely a hope that you are all the functions of marketing as well. And I agree that those two things have a lot of overlap in terms of outcomes that they need and stories they want to tell, but it's not the same skill set. Right. So do I know how to boost something on Facebook? I think the last time I did it is when I was in marketing for Wellington. I'm guessing the algorithm has changed since then, right? Mm-hmm. So trying to be able to kind of either prioritize or make the case for part-time or consultant type help, right? I mean, I think it's always the like give and take of what do we really need to tackle here and who's good at that? And if it's not me, can I get some support to bring in additional bodies?
Yes, that is so critical. So can we talk about that a little bit? Like,
please.
If you're a one-person shop, where do you focus your time, right? So it's really, that is the hardest part of being a one person. Yeah. It's like, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck, or where do we establish a strong foundation for the future? Yeah. How do we decide that?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think, and it's interesting for me to say what I'm going to say because I've been into startups, right? So looking at the track record it's not very long, right? But the track record does speak to something, right? When I took the Move to Prosper job, they had 3 successful years of a pilot that was happening under the OSU umbrella, right? And now we've become independent just since August 1st. But, I think I lost my train of thought.
Well, congratulations, by the way, on doing that. I mean, on moving from, that means that you're doing really well, right?
Yeah,
You're getting to be sustainable, that elusive sustainability. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Did you get your train of thought back?
I could see, I had a pie chart that I could look at and see where was my time going to be best spent in terms of fundraising, right? Setting aside that I was going to have to play some other roles with a different hat, right? 71% of the pilot was funded by individuals, 22% by businesses. So where should I spend my time? Probably time to go out and have some coffees, right? I don't need to spend a bunch of time dialing up, the key banks and PNCs and Huntingtons of the world first. Maybe that could be my second step, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I think that helps a little bit, but I also think I have enough self-awareness now to understand what I'm going to be good at getting done and what would best be handed to someone else. So, I mean, I'm not proud to say it took getting past 45 years old to be able to articulate that in the right rooms, but now I kind of own my value and try to say, you know what, when you spend money on me not spending time on what I'm good at, we're all kind of just spinning our wheels, right? So, but I will solve it, hand it to me to solve, but I do need somebody who's better at this than me to come and help out.
That's a great point. So that sweet spot of, where should I be spending my time, right? And for most nonprofits, especially startup nonprofits, it should be with individuals, because in the US, something like 80% of funding to nonprofits comes from individuals, right? It's individual contributions. And often startup nonprofits get that kind of backwards. They're like, we just need to get grants, right? And grants usually don't come for a while. A lot of grantors won't give you a grant until you've been in business for a couple of years. And and combining that with what your strengths are, right? Like you're definitely a very extroverted, social, kind of person. So it makes sense that you're out and about meeting with people.
Right.
So you establish that sort of as, that's going to be like 77% of what I do, or whatever you said, 70% plus of what you're going to be doing, right? So I love the way you kind of analyze that, right? That's where does our funding come from? It's coming from individuals, mostly. That's where I should spend most of my time.
Yeah.
So what about for somebody who's just getting started? Like, what would you recommend, as far as trying to decide what's the biggest, not just biggest ROI, but where should I be spending my time? Where should I be?
Okay, so I'm going to ask for help from the chat because I see my friends Kati and Regina and Jess on here, and they're small shoppers too, so they're going to help out. But okay, so you're taking one of these jobs for the first time and trying to figure out how to spend your time. Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, right. So what data can you get your hands around, right? You've got to be, I'm thinking if you're in fundraising, you've got to have some ability with the database. And if not, go find somebody, right, to pull that information out, or at least like, has anyone taught you how to look at the financials? That's something somebody did for me at German Village, right? Like there's always somebody out there that can help you. And honestly, I know these 3 women from Association for Fundraising Professionals, so that's a great place to start with these. Like, need a peer, need a cry room. What is it that you need? There's a group of people that can tell you, right?
Right.
I think too, there's nothing like polling your peers. I am really sure that I've never been the smartest person in any room. I always am trying to pull out of other people what they know so that I can get better at where I think the world is, right? So obviously, whomever your boss is needs to weigh in, but probably the people in program have an idea of how this works or who's interesting or what's getting neglected, right? the CFO, if that is a position, probably not in a small shop, let's be honest, it's probably the treasurer of the board, right? But they have a perspective. And then I have been, man, do we have a cool board at Move to Prosper? And they are connected in such different ways from each other, but also different ways than my expectation was when I was part of the recruiting process, right? Because I'm like staff support to the nominating committee. So we would go and get people, and this continues, constantly, right? But we'll have someone's resume in front of us, and a couple of us will think we know that person, and they join the board, and it's like, no, they have this whole other perspective or set of friends or knowledge set that we didn't even know about, right? So I don't know. I think it's humbling to go ask for help, but I think it's also the fastest way to get it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And then I too, it sounds like I'm spending a lot of time thinking about things. That's extremely not true. I'm a fast decision maker. So for me, I sort of try to see where I can gather enough clues to go and try this out. And then I'll come back and, okay, let's let that kind of bubble for a minute. And then I'll try to gather clues about the next thing and see if I can get that underway. But I think people were likely in the job before you, or people have expectations for why they hired you or how they expect you to work within the team. So there's probably a breadcrumb trail if you're willing to go look at it.
Yeah, board, and I'm going to go back to your comment. Your boards are so important. They're so important. And, you can either recruit people in a really good way and they're ready to come in and work, or sometimes, folks default to, you just have to come to a board meeting. Could you just do that? Like begging people on the board, right? And then if you just tell them all they have to do is show up for a board meeting, don't be surprised when that's all they do, right? Because really, you have to
stay superhero. Anytime I need thoughts about how to better interact with the board, or I sit on a couple boards, so I'm also interested in being better on that side of the table, right? But one of her things is don't hide the ball. If there's work, tell them about the work.
Yes. And I say, really, you should interview potential board members just like you would staff, and they need to understand what's expected and what the organization's trying to pull off and where they can help, because people want to help. Board people, typically people who are board members on nonprofit boards, are type A personality, to use that term, and they're doers, right? So they want to do. They just need to understand very clearly what it is.
And where it fits in their probably very tightly scheduled lives anyway, right? Yeah.
A lot of times I tell nonprofit staff when they're trying to recruit board members or other board members, really, just drill it down to do you have an hour a week? Could you spend an hour a week on our stuff? Yeah. And if you don't have a specific time, throw that out there as a holding place, right? Because people can get their head wrapped around that. Do I have an hour in a week, right? So
I love that. I'll steal that, by the way. Thank you for the free consulting.
Anytime.
That's what this is for, right?
Anytime. So I'm going to ask you this question. It's a good one. You suggested it, so thank you. And people ask it all the time. Are there tools, that you have found helpful that you would recommend for small shops to make it easier or more effective?
Yeah, and it's kind of a mix of things. And again, it's sort of where are the things that you have some ability to do, and where are the things that you need someone else to hand you a tool, right? So because you heard in my bio that my last job in TV news is running the website, right? And those are in the kind of pioneer days of putting your news on the web, right? But I have enough online tool skills to get a lot of things done, right? So WordPress is a great tool. I would never go with any overwhelming database like Blackbaud, where you have to have special certifications. I would go with Bloomerang or Classy, or something that's kind of going to work a lot like your Word document and your Excel sheet that you're already working in, right? Hootsuite makes things easier. They're just whatever, if you like Slack, or, if there are just ways for you to kind of quickly not make a lot of process out of things, but be able to kind of move fast and come back to your work for those notes and reminders, and figure out that you did not in fact break things as you went fast.
I think that's really key, Shiloh, is to have, there's so many, you're managing so many different things that you can't rely on your memory or, a notepad, right? Really to be most effective. And so those tools become really important, that you're really leveraging them, and you're going to need those notes.
The things that I try to, going back to the volunteers thing, right? And helping them understand, am I in this for an hour a week, an hour a month, right? But I think enough meeting prep to be able to say off the top of a meeting, especially a committee meeting, not a board meeting, right? But here's what I'm trying to get out of you today, right? Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I need you to work on with this sort of timeline work. Okay, now let's spend the meeting time exchanging ideas about how this is going to work, or strategizing, or, feedback on the graphic, or, whatever it is, depends on the committee, right? But I think if you can expectation set with the folks you're trying to get to work alongside you, that's really worth your time too.
Yeah. And that's what board members like to do best, right? They like to problem solve and troubleshoot and contribute and discuss strategies and real meaty stuff, versus just hearing a report out for 3 or 4, right? So it's a sweet spot. So that's a great point. Well, any last words or suggestions or thoughts, Shiloh?
No, I think it is really rewarding and sometimes incredibly frustrating work, but there are amazing nonprofits in Central Ohio, and some of us are doing the job on 3 or 4 or 5 humans, right? So I'll just celebrate all of those people out there that might be in that situation.
Let's just take a minute, right, to celebrate all those nonprofit people.
You're making it happen.
Most all of them are overworked and underpaid, and so thank you all for all that you do, because you make the world a better place for sure. Thank you, Shiloh. That's such a beautiful place to end. I really appreciate you saying that too, and doing the shout out. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you for being on today. This was a really good discussion. Join us next week. So our guest, Ariel Dotson, will be talking about her experience co-founding a nonprofit organization and being a small shop. So that seems to be the theme for the next couple of weeks anyway. So every Thursday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, we have some robust conversation about some great topics that nonprofits face, and we hope you'll join us. Thank you, Shiloh, so much for being here.
Thanks for the conversation.
It's great. Bye, everyone.